My name's Clay Wesner. I'm the PM for the Common Data Model, which is the schema that sits within the Common Data Service, just to confuse everyone. With me today I have Lance and Matthew, which are our PMs for integration and security, respectively. They're going to introduce themselves a little bit more when they come up. To give you some background, the purpose of this session is focusing more on the management or the administration roles of CDS. So we're going to talk about how we sort of group up objects and artifacts within the CDS. Lance is going to talk about the integration processes and how we manage those, and Matthew is going to talk about security. There are various sessions that we have at the conference this week. We have a slide at the end for some of the related. For those of you that attended the overview session I did this morning, I'm going to try and avoid overlap too much. We'll do a quick overview in the beginning, but then we'll get into new content. For those of you that missed the overview this morning because it was full, we've actually added a repeat tomorrow afternoon for that session. So if you go onto the online app, it'll be added tomorrow afternoon. You can look it up by my name would be the easiest way to find it, or by CDS, but we will have an extra session for that for the people that missed out. Okay. So, what is the Common Data Service? I'm going to do this quickly and talk about more in management aspects. As I said, the overview session is a better place to do this. At the very, very center, we have the Common Data Model, okay? So this is a schema or a definition of entities that is published by Microsoft, and it's the area that I look after. So this is something for an administrator doesn't really need to manage or worry about. These common entities are published by us and maintained by us. The only real management aspect of these is when we release updates or changes to them. At the moment, we're not making any breaking changes, which means our changes are only additive. We're not removing anything. We're not breaking any relationships that already exist. What will happen in the future in this area that will sort of impact from an administration and management perspective is we may have areas where we've decided that a field is no longer required or a relationship that needs to change, and an administrator would need to review and make a decision about how that change fits in with that CDS. Doesn't apply right now. We're in a slightly simpler world for a little while, but moving forward it will. The next element up is then custom entities. So these are entities that you as an organization have built yourself. They've either come from an application from an ISV, or they've come from an application from a first party. This, we start getting into more the ALM properties of how you're actually going to manage the artifacts, move them between environments and things like that. And then the next level up is the security model. I'm not going to steal any thunder here. This is what Matthew is going to talk about, but it's very much essential and key to the CDS and how we actually access those entities underneath. Okay, so our second topic for the day is then going to be integration. So these guys over on the left-hand side here, Dynamics 365 for operations, sales, and financials, and external systems. So obviously we want the CDS to be the focal point of data, but one of the first tasks there is going to be getting data into the CDS so that you can actually use it. So Lance is going to take you through how we look at managing those data integration projects and how we map and move information between the different systems. On the right-hand side, this is more the integration with the other Microsoft products that sit out in the world. So we have add-in available for Excel and Outlook. We also have Power BI connectivity and Microsoft Flow. So these aren't really anything that needs to be administered. They're just connectivity points that we already have available with the CDS. I'm going to click a lot here across the top. Those two boxes are then the actual apps that you build on top of the Common Data Service. So at the moment, our primary access point is through Power Apps. How many people in the room have used Power Apps? Okay. So we're a data source available for Power Apps. You can go and build your applications. What's going to be coming, and we have sessions on this week, is then the CDS SDK. So this is then your ability to programmatically work with the CDS and access data and build your own applications. You'll also notice the Dynamics first-party apps are there. So if you hear us talking about talent engagement, customer engagement, retail workforce management, all those new apps that are coming out from us at the moment are all built off CDS, and they're leveraging the SDK that we're going to be shipping available to customers as well. So from an administration perspective, what we're touching on today and what's going to grow with our ALM story is these integration projects. the entities that the SDK and Power App requires, all start generating artifacts that need to be managed within your CDS environment. So the idea here is that we have a sort of a top-level premise of an environment. So within your tenant or your organization, you can have multiple environments that you choose what they have, what you do with them. One CDS environment will only ever have one database or environment within it, okay? Or database. So it has a copy of your schema and the data that you put within that, and you control security at that environment level. So it also contains and can control Power Apps, so you can include an app within that environment, flows within that environment, and Power BI perspectives. So that top-level idea of an environment starts becoming that wrapper that you can do to break up different groups within your business that may not want to share apps or need to segregate their data for some reason, or between a sandbox and test environment and a production environment. Okay? So it starts giving you that control of breaking things up and not working in one place. Obviously, security still applies. So I only see an app if I have access to it. I only see a flow if I have access to it. But the environment really gives you that top-level container that you can have a little bit more access with. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to have a quick look at how that environment sort of shows itself within Power Apps, and then we'll actually jump into some of the detail in integrations and security. Can everyone see the text on the screen? No? I don't know if you were messing with me or if that was real, but I'll zoom in slightly. So I'm logged into Power Apps right now because they're our primary access point. We talked about SDK, but Power Apps is a primary point, so we access through the Power Apps portal. Now, what you'll notice up in the right-hand corner here is we have this environment drop-down, and this will show you all the environments that you have access to, whether you've created them yourself or someone has given you access to that environment. Once I've selected the environment, all of the apps, the flows, the gateways, the entities, and the pick lists that I now navigate to within Power Apps all relate to that particular environment that I've seen, okay? So if I'm trying to navigate between environments, the idea is come up here, change your environment, and then you'll see different artifacts or different content within these different areas. As I mentioned before, at a base level, there's always going to be the core set of standard entities that sit within any environment that are published by Microsoft. So you can see all these ones that have type standard, all distributed by Microsoft. But what's going to start getting added to that is you'll start seeing ISV content, first-party app content, and that's going to start growing. Now, where these guys are going to spend a lot of their time and what they show you today is what we call the admin center. So if I have access and I'm an administrator on any environments, I can log into the admin center, and this is where I start controlling things like security and integrations and giving me the ability to create new environments if I need, for example, another test or sandbox environment, and starting to see some of the information behind it. So these guys are going to go into more detail. But if you hear us referring to the admin portal, enabling a preview in admin portal, or something along those lines in environment management, this is where we centralize it. We're also doing a lot of work at the moment across the Power Apps and the flow teams to continue to centralize this. So you'll see more and more administrator-based flows, or sorry, processes added into the admin portal. And this is really what's going to grow. So what we are going to start with today is integration. And that is going to be Mr. Lance Delano. Give us 1 moment to change over a PC, and then we will be ready to go.
There we go. Sorry. All right, so when we talk about the CDS, the Common Data Service, one of the topics is integration. And we have a couple of goals around integration. Some super important for us to make the Dynamics products actually work together. Today, they don't work together very well. And so we want to enable them to work together on what we call a scenario focus. So when we talk about integration, we'll be enabling scenarios along a number of scenarios like prospect to cache or project service to project accounting, field service, et cetera, so that they work end to end. That's the first point. The second point is that we're doing this through a series of project templates. So if you have something like prospect to cache that has a number of entities that you want to make sure show up on both sides of in each system, You may have extended AX or CRM with custom attributes, and you want to be able to extend those templates to be able to take advantage of those. So you can customize these, or you can create new ones on your own. So easily extended, define your own. And then another point is that while it's certainly possible, for instance, to use a product like Flow to be able to move data back and forth between the two systems, this needs to be a first-class feature of the Dynamics 365 environment. So it needs to be super easy to run, it needs to be super easy to administer, and to monitor. So you'll be able to define things and actually kind of move them across. And a central feature of the way we're going to do integration is to synchronize data through the CDS. And the reason we're doing that is so that we can lower the bar for entry to business users so that they can easily extend the Dynamics products with their own data, with little apps that they can write. So from a competitive standpoint, this is super important to us. So we want to extend through the Common Data Service. The way we're going to do this, the primary way that we're going to do this, is to synchronize, for instance, with master data along the concept of business keys. So if I have a notion of what a customer is in AX, I'd like that same notion to be there in CRM or in sales, in operations and sales. That same way that I think about a customer needs to be able to show up in both places. So that means that we need to synchronize on business keys. And so for each of these projects, what we'll be doing is looking at what the key needs to be, for instance, on the sales side. And often, the sales side of the equation doesn't always have a business key. So we'll actually inject a business key to make it work. And here's an example, a simple example of us doing data sync, for instance, in the prospect to cash kind of world, where we take something like a lead and then opportunities, and then we move the data down into operations. And then there's other documents that we can also synchronize across as well. Now, one question that you might ask is, well, gee, sometimes there's business process associated with these things. First, we're doing data synchronization, and then we'll move on to process synchronization. Here's a simple example. I have these two systems. I have sales and operations, and I want to be able to extract data out of sales and move it into the CDS. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use something called the M engine. The M engine is the query technology that sits underneath Power Query. Power Query goes to some 75 or some odd different data sources. So you can imagine how we can use that technology going forward in a kind of a flexible way. But if we use the M engine to kind of bring data out, it also allows us to do a rich set of transforms to bring data out of a system and move it in through the CDS. So we'll do the import, various transforms, and then move it over into operations. And then the inverse is also true. I'm not going to show that particular little animation. But then you can move data back as well. In the beginning, we'll move data one way. We'll move it simply from sales into operations. And then later on, as we advance, we'll enable multi-master scenarios where you can actually edit on either side. But to begin with, kind of crawl, walk, run, we'll enable basically the simple forward from CRM, from sales into operations. All right. Where's our AV guy? Okay, here we go. Yes. Got it. Well, this is real time. So what we wanted to show you is actually these bits actually working. Let me see what we've got going here. This is, why can't I put that? Oh, it's just the nature of the machine. Okay, so what we have here, this is Power Apps, and I'm not sure why we're not rendering our set of entities here. There we go. All right, so this is Power Apps itself with the set of entities that Clay was talking about a few minutes ago. And then we also have the admin center, which you can see here. I'm going to click here. Where's end? Can't see it. Okay, I'm not sure what I can do to put it into high contrast mode from here. Any thoughts on what to do to put it into high contrast mode? Does that help? No? Oh, man.
There isn't any web personalization for that? Separate theme for us?
There's not a separate theme that I know of yet. Still early days. You can change your window settings, I think is what... Okay. All right. I'm sorry. You can't see I can't even see it very well. But what's listed here is a set of data integration projects. And what should be showing up here, but you can't get it without a switch, is the word data integration, which will show up here. We are literally developing and trying to get to the point where we can push out to a beta. And then we have here, this is operations. You can see there's no data in here. And I don't have a link here for my CRM instance. So what I can do, let's just do this and see if we can get this going. So, there we go. Okay. So what we have here is a list of templates. These are project types, essentially, that have been pre-created. And I'm sorry that it's hard to read them, but there's a demo template. There's account to customers, simply going from sales account into AX customers through the CDS. There's contacts to person. There's accounts. I can kind of scroll down here a little bit. Oops. There's several templates that have been built. So I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call it, say, 11 Lance. Shall I call it Lance? 04, whatever. Okay, and I'm going to select accounts here. And then I am asked to provide a set of connections. So I'm going to provide a connection to my sales account. And I want that guy. And I want to choose my... So this is available. This is available through the TAP program. So you can get this available with TAP. No, not the brightness issue. Yeah. That work better? Great. Okay. All right. So I've selected There we go. I've selected a connection for sales. I'll choose a data set for my CDS environment. I'll choose a connection for, operations. It's this last one. And I'll provide a company code. And with that, I'll hit next. Now, the next thing that happens is because you're moving data out of sales into a less certified system, either CDS or operations, which will likely have their certifications move up in the not too distant future. But because you're moving out of that, we need you to legally consent that you understand that that's happening. Another thing that could happen is you might accidentally, because the integration projects can run across geolocations as well, is that if you're moving data across geolocations, we need you to understand that you might be doing that and your data is crossing those kinds of boundaries. Okay, so now it's created a project. We'll go look at that project in a second here. So this literally was running, so we'll go over here and look at this great yesterday. Let's take a look at this guy. And we're going to run this again. So we've got some issues with our clusters. And I'm going to run this till you see a task named show up here. Oh, I got several of them. There we go. Okay. So while that's running, let's go back and look at this. So this is the mapping that I was talking about. And this one's not going to go to AX. I picked the wrong template. This one's going to go, as you can see, it's going to go from sales into the CDS. Let me go back up here for a minute. These two arrows show the fact that it traverses down and traverses back. If I click on this guy, I can see the mappings that are actually taking place. And if we find, this is all the various mappings that we do right now. And you can switch to the other leg just by clicking on this tab right here. So if we go back up, and we'll go look at scheduling here, and we'll open this up, and it says that is complete. Just refresh that. And, well, yep, there we go. So now if I go look at, let me go back over here, and I go back to my account. Here we go, account. This is the data that's in the Common Data Store. And here's the attributes that are in the Common Data Store. And if I click on data, takes a second. There it is. Data's there. Now, let me see if I can go back and, so now you've seen it going into the CDS. Let's see if we can create another project. Doesn't look like it wants to cooperate here. So anyway, we're having problems with instances moving back between clusters. I have a video of it working yesterday, which is on this machine. Unfortunately. Let me try this again.
So is the process to move the data from sales to CDS and CDS to operations?
Correct. Yeah, some questions about the process here if you want. Yeah, go ahead. The mapping is managed through the template, and the template is, and once it's been instantiated, you can change it. You'll be able to create your own templates as well. Basically, they'll be JSON files. At some point, you'll be able to export them and import them and be able to do the mappings that you want. But that's exactly right. And then there are a set of transforms that will need to take place. For instance, if you're going from something that's like a set of lookup tables to some enums, you'll have to have some value mapping. So you can kind of use the query tool to kind of bring it in as a flat column, but you'll probably have to map it to something on the other side sometimes. So there's both defaults, there's custom mappings, there's a number of things you'll want to be able to do, and we think that the M engine and the M query language will be very, very powerful in helping people do those transforms. Okay. All right. Your deck, I have a couple slides that remain after this. What? Can you do what? Computed fields. So computed column coming in, you mean? Yeah, that you can map to something on the other side. That's right. It'll just show up on the left side of the set of columns to be mapped. That's right. Okay. This does not seem to want to participate here in the... All right. So I think what I want... Yeah. That's correct. All right, just a couple more points. So somebody asked earlier, how can you get a hold of this? So access to these bits is via the TAP program. This is a do not use on production data till it's actually GA'd. So, but we're looking for people who would like to try it out. And I mentioned about the transfer of data out of sales and across geolocations. We'll be beginning this. I talked briefly about the data sync versus process sync. So data sync started a while back. We'll begin on process sync in the not too distant future. And then what would happen in the process sync world is then you'd have messaging basically that would evoke events across the two systems. And this is kind of our backlog right now. So process synchronization is something that we're going to start relatively soon. Auto handling of business keys, multi-master scenarios, and then data synchronization with third parties through the CDS. So other parties could actually get their data into the CDS via this mechanism. Our first priority, of course, is getting the first-party apps, Microsoft apps, to work. So any other questions before we transition? Yes? Yeah, so I mentioned this very briefly. You could write a bunch of flow connectors to be able to do some of these kinds of things. But flow, for instance, is more of a record-by-record sort of transfer. And this UI, this functionality is oriented around bulk movement of data. So if you have to move a whole bunch of data, it's optimized for being able to do that, number one. Number two, it's built into the system so that it's easy to monitor. So you'll probably have a nice little dashboard where you can kind of see the status of runs that have taken place, some nice places to go to find records that didn't transfer for some reason. So all of that will kind of be built in as a first-class thing. Asking our customers to go build data integration for something that should work together in the first place is probably not the nicest thing in the world to do. So we want to make it a first-class part of the product. Yeah? Yeah, so the details around how we're going to do the process sync, there's a bunch of ideas on how to do that. Pub sub, there's a bunch of messaging kinds of things you could certainly do in that space. The details have yet to be finalized, but that's the right kind of direction to think. Yeah.
So the technology that you're using for 365 operations, data access, are you using the
We're using a combination of DIXF and the OData heads that are available in AX. So both of those. Yeah. Mudit's here to keep me honest. Yes?
When you plan on augmenting the feature set with the triggers for the operations side? Right now,
Oh, the AX7 connector?
yeah, to 365. Right now, it's only limited to the features on create a
CRUD. Yeah. That's actively being worked on. I don't have an immediate time frame for it, though. Yes?
I don't know if you said this earlier, but is it doing a full load or is it incremental push?
So the first time, when nothing has been synced, it just moves everything over. After that, it does a delta sync. Yeah. Yes, in the back.
This is kind of this synchronization, so that's kind of works between two live systems. But in the earlier session, I mentioned that something like an Excel plugin, not syncing one between the live system and something like Excel.
Oh, so you're talking like a data import where you, on demand, you say, I want to bring it in? Yeah, so that's one of the reasons we're using the M technology is to enable those kinds of scenarios. You can imagine Power Query sitting on top of some kind of an engine that would allow our users to be able to get data into the CDS that way. That's definitely one of the reasons we chose the M technology. If it's a one-time thing, you don't need this is really about, this UI is mostly about the recurring synchronizations. You need two systems to always be in sync on a every half hour or whatever, every 30 minutes, 15 minutes, hour, day, whatever you pick, right? Or pub sub right away, right? Okay, anything else? Okay, with that, turn it over to you, Matthew.
Hello. Can you hear me? So I'm Matthew Martins. I'm the program manager for security. I own both the CDS security model and the operations security model. So I'll start off, we'll work our way from the top level with environments, and we'll get down to kind of the data access that actually interactions with the CDS. So Clay gave an introduction of environments. You'll start with environment admin. This is your kind of super user. When I start an environment, I'm default environment admin. If I want to create a CDS database, I have to be an environment admin. He's the one who's going to manage my users, bring in makers, do all the kind of configurations that will follow in this presentation. So two other environment level roles are the environment maker. These are the ones who actually build resources. I can build an app off of things in the CDS. I can build connections, custom APIs. Think of these guys who are actually building the things my users want to interact with. The last one, environment user, this is basically everyone else. So by default, you're a user. You don't have to do anything special to get this permission. And one thing I'll call it is these sit at the environment level. So if you have an environment without CDS, these guys are still valid and apply. So if we move downward, we have our environment. I want to create a database in there. As a kind of carry on from this morning, the very first question you have to ask yourself is, should it be open or restricted? Open mode is full access to everyone. This is purely a convenience thing. So there's a couple cases where you use it. If you have no sensitive data, you don't mind everyone seeing everything inside the CDS, go for it. Open mode lets you kind of skip all the user management. I don't have to build roles. I don't have to management. The process is much simpler. If I have a dev and test environment, I'm playing around. It's demo data, it's test data. There's no real sensitive information there. Go for open mode, keeps things simple, lets me do rapidly change. I can move things in and out without having to worry about my security artifacts being kept in sync. Restricted mode is my favorite. Please use restricted mode. This is what keeps your data safe. The security guy is going to hound you if you don't put it in restricted mode, especially in production. So restricted mode will be your user roles. It's going to have your RLS in the preview that we'll talk about. It's going to have all the goodness of the security model are going to be applied. We'll do the best to keep your data locked down. So user roles, I'm in my restricted mode. Access is governed by user roles. So these are separate from the environment level roles you had before. So if I am a user and I'm just using an application, this is what's going to grant me access. If I'm a maker, the ability to make something doesn't let me necessarily use it. So if I'm in the IT department, I make an app for HR where they're looking at people's payroll and social security numbers. I don't want to give him access to that data. So I have to have explicit user roles to see the data that's actually in CDS. And you can draw the connections between the CDS roles and the operations roles. Operations, we have role, duty, privilege, permission. So this is slightly simpler. We take out one of those abstraction layers. Your role is still going to be your user assignment. This is where you put groups, you assign individual users, and do your management. Permission sets, think of this as your building blocks. This is where the heavy lifting is done. If I have a single app, so on here we have a scheduling and inventory app, I can make a single permission set and push that to every different role in my enterprise that needs to be using that app. So here we have like a sales worker. I could easily take the permission sets out, put it to a sales clerk, sales manager. It gives you that level of reuse to keep you from recreating artifacts over and over again for every different use case. So user roles right now are at an object level. So the final kind of access is at the entity level. So here we have, say, workers and a timesheet for our scheduling app. I could assign permissions individually for each of these. So it's your basic create, read, update, delete. You can get any combination of those that you can imagine. And those will be per permission set. So if I repeat an entity in a permission set for a different role, we're going to aggregate that all up as you go up in layers. So if I have a permission set, say, for scheduling app with workers, I have another one that also uses worker. I'm going to get the combination view of those when I finally roll it up to the role. And then coming in preview very soon will be RLS. So these policies hang off of your entity access. So on each entity, for the access level, I can define a policy. So what that means is I can say I have one rule for those who can read a record. So maybe I can read everything that's in my sales region. But then I could only update those accounts that belong to me. So I can define a finer level of granularity between each access level there. So to make using these user roles easier, we provide two out of the box. Your database owner, for those who are AX aficionados, this is kind of like the system admin in AX. This guy will have access to everything always. This ensures nothing gets lost. You always have someone who can go in and fix records. Something gets deleted by accident, the RLS won't pick it up. This is your one to go find and catch that data. On the flip side of that, we have the organizational user. This is intended for the public data. So for AX, you'd equate this to system user. This is the things that everyone in my organization should be able to see. Think if I'm building a power app for a cafeteria menu, the bus schedule, something that's public, everyone can see. I don't have to worry about who's going to come in and use that data. This gets assigned to everyone the second the provision to CDS. So as I build custom entities, things that I want to go and I know it should be public, rather than having to build a special role for it and then assign particular users, I can drop it in here. It will be available for all, ready to go. One other thing that's not called out specifically, and I'll show in the demo, is we do have out-of-the-box permission sets for entities that are in the common data model. And these just kind of serve as starting points because we hope that people will be using those entities widely. So we give you a read-only and a maintain or kind of full access off of those out of the box so you can start to piece your roles together right away. One piece, since it came up this morning, there was lots of questions. There is consistent security from CDS across the Power layer. And what this means is if I come in through a Power app, if I come in through a Flow, I come in through Power BI, if someone has built a CDS SDK app on top of the CDS, we will apply the same level of security to all of those. So you get the same view. There's no data leakage, as Jonah mentioned this morning. We're going to respect security throughout. And the nice thing here is even if I jump out, I can have different entry points. So Power BI, if I share the report, I don't need to be managing security in both locations. We'll replicate the CDS security out to Power BI as well. So I'm going to jump over to a demo and kind of walk you through these. And you're not seeing, so let me. Okay, so I have a question. I have option 1, it's like the eye doctor, or option 2. 2? Okay. So this is the admin portal you saw earlier. I'm in the security tab. You get the option to manage all your different roles. So environment roles are separated out. If I had an admin portal here that did not have a CDS database in it, the user role and permission sets are simply hidden. You won't see them. There's no need to manage them. So there's no option there. Environment, admin, and maker, these are your environment level access. So this is a very simple assign a user. I can type in here and say maybe add clay to my environment if the internet cooperates. But you get the idea. Environment maker would go the same way. We drop down to user roles. You'll see you have the 2 out-of-the-box roles, so our database owner. When I come in here, there's no permission sets in this role because it has everything. So behind the scenes, we're ensuring that you always have access. If I create artifacts, I don't have to do anything special to keep this in sync. It's completely managed for you. So the only action I would do is come in here and add users. And one thing special I'll call out is the database owner. This is a somewhat special role in that it grants access to schema as well. So if I'm going to add custom entities, I'm going to go modify something that's existing, I need to be a database owner today. And this is because we don't want everyone across the company, all my makers who could be my information workers, to be mucking with the schema, which could cause breaking changes for your company. So this is just a way of locking it down. We may introduce a new role that would be kind of equivalent to the maker role at the environment level that would give you these permissions as well. Today, it is just the DB owner. So I'll jump to our other out-of-the-box role, and this is flipped. So as we saw in the database owner, I could see users and not permission sets. With the org user role, I see permission sets and not users. This is because we keep users in sync for you, and you have to add the permission sets that you'd like to be shared across the company. So this is all well and great, but usually I'm never going to have just these 2 roles. I need much level-grained access throughout. So let's say I've introduced an app and I need to secure it. So the first thing I'd want to do is I come in here and I'm going to make a permission set for it. So I can say I'm going to make a permission set. It's for my, apologies here, say my tech conference. So I can create a permission set. This is going to save it. I'll get an instance of the permission set in the portal when it comes back here. So now I have a tech conference permission set. And I'll go through here, and we'll pick the entities and the access levels that are needed, just like in our diagram. So I'm going to get the full list of entities when it loads here. So I have details that I just put in. I'll drop to entities, and I get everything. So here, by default, it's an empty. I see all the entities that I'm able to add. So I can scroll through here and pick something interesting. We'll just say this is an account app. So I need full access on the account entity. Our RLS preview, you would see kind of an edit set policies. And for each of those, I would define something to say maybe that there's this pick list and it's in my department per se. So I'll save this guy. And with my contrast, I can't see if the button has actually changed and it's taken. We'll assume it went. And then I can go make a role that contains this. So let's say I'm making a tech conference role. And it's a very similar flow here. So we'll just call it TC because I'm typing one-handed. And then I'll walk through and add the permission sets here. So the nice thing about the roles is we have permission sets out of the box, so I can type something and I could say, hey, I want to maintain this account data, account contact. So I could add existing permission set. These are one of the out-of-the-box ones, so it comes right in. Or I can go ahead and search for a custom permission set that I've made myself. Add them the same way, and then go ahead and assign users to it. So our users, we can put in a user or a group. Let me see if I can get Clay. I'm going to look up. Am I spelling your name right? W-E-S. If it wants to come back. So this is tied to AAD, I promise. It will come in, you'll see your users and your groups in the drop-down. And then I'll add them just by saving. But it seems to not be returning. Okay, we'll move on. So the one final thing I'll show is on the database here. This is your toggle right here. So I've created a bunch of my roles. If I want to switch between open and restricted, if I'm in a development stance and I want to test something, I can come into my database tab, and this will change that setting. So with a simple kind of click, I will say, hey, you're going to restrict access. These roles are going to become active. I'll confirm, and now everything will have been locked down with no access throughout. Similarly, if I found, hey, something's wrong, I can go ahead and just flip back the same way. And now I'm back in open mode. So that wraps my demo up. I can open to questions. Yep. So today it's only in the same tenant. We do have plans to support Azure B2C, which is consumer identities, which could be from anywhere. Yep.
I have a question about maintaining source security.
Okay.
I saw during the integration, like user account is selected to actually integrate. Does that mean that
Sure.
the user and like CRM is have access to constantly?
Yes. So there's a couple different slices of it. So the question was about user accounts used for integration between sources. If I have a connection and I put in a username password, on the receiving end, it's going to operate in that context. When I bring data in, if it is coming into the CDS, the data now resides in that database, user roles are still going to govern your access. We do some things to try to keep them in sync, like from Power BI. If you brought something in Power BI, we'll kind of match that security. So if it's in CDS, our roles will apply throughout. If you're doing something that has an integration and there's user context on the kind of outbound or inbound end, then that will pass through. Yeah. Yep, in the middle there. Yeah, so the question was, is or will there be a record level security framework? So we're working on RLS in a piecemeal fashion. The first thing we'll get is pick list and what I call a security principle. Think an individual owns this, it's created by this person. We will then introduce security dimensions, which is something that would need to be set on a field that will be marked. So in code or in the Maker portal, I'll say, hey, this column of my table, I want to be securable, and then I will allow me to define an RLS policy based on that. I'll go one back over here. So when you say lockdown customers, what's our slice? Sure. Yeah. Okay, so the question was, I have settings on, say, credit limit in CRM or operations. I'm syncing that data into CDS. Do I need to come into CDS and set those same kind of controls? So today, yes, you would have to come in. You would have to kind of set up the equivalent user roles in CDS. We are looking at, with our first parties applications, CRM operations, to see what we can do to pull the security models and align them. So if we don't directly pull it in, at least replicate the effective access levels between them. But that would definitely be in the future. There's one over here somewhere. Yeah, so the first party applications, the CRMs, CDS operations today are not replicated throughout. We are going to do the best we can with the first party to kind of make them match. Yeah. Mhm. Yep. Yes. So the question was, if I have an entity in AX and I bring it into CDS and that entity had column level security on it, will that come into CDS? So two pieces. One, there's no column level in CDS today. It is in the roadmap. So we will get there eventually. And the follow-on to that is we don't have it today, so it is not coming over. So it won't be mapped in CDS. Right. You won't. So it will come in. The data will, if you import it, the data will come in. We don't have a column level control for CDS to block specifically that one. Yeah. That is true, yeah. So I would only be able to pull the data out of operations that I had access to. So if my account that I was using to do that poll didn't have access to that column, it would be hidden from them and then would never be passed into CDS. I'm not sure. I'll defer to Lance for this one. So the question is, if I set an integration, do I define an account that integration operates under?
Oh, an account, or do you mean, so it's going to be a network admin, is that what you mean credential-wise? Oh, yeah. Okay, fair enough. So yeah, so when you're operating as a given user, you can only pull the data that you have. The data integration projects need to run at sort of an admin level. So, for instance, in CRM, you have a CRM administrator that can see can get at all of the data, has access to all of the data. That's the kind of admin privileges you would need if you want to bring over all the data into CDS and then over into operations. So the data integration projects are an IT admin sort of role that you would run on a recurring basis. They're not the general everyday user type of project. Fair enough? Great.
So we would leverage a service account to manage integration and any sort of data in the CDS that we want to leverage directly via or whatever it is, or SDK. We should manage the field level or the field permission, or not, excuse me, the permissions there at CDS.
Right, so there's going to be, service level accounts, the traditional sort of, dev test production, you have different accounts for different things. That's the kind of world in which the data integration projects you would want them to run in, right? Does that make sense? Great.
Going to add a 2-second plug. Tomorrow, there's a new authentication flow for operations. We will talk about service to service on the operations side in that session. So question towards the back. Yeah. So the question was, if I switch between restricted and open mode, will it keep all my users' permissions that are there? Yes, it will keep them. If I'm in open mode, it's basically just turning off the access checks. So all the artifacts will remain, they just won't be enforced. Yep. Yeah. So the question was, I'm going between dev and test. I'm changing metadata. Can I export them through the admin center? Short answer is I believe so. I don't know. Do you know if there's a ALM session? So it's coming. You can see import, export resources up here. So I don't know if there's a session, but this will be made available. You may see this just because it's in a preview. But up at the top, there is import, export, which will let you pull artifacts out of environment, stick it in a package, and then bring it into another one. So the question was on data upgrade, and I don't know. Do you have any insights on those ones?
Sorry, can you repeat the question for me one more time?
Let's say I'm changing metadata so much that I need to upgrade my data in CDS. Is there a framework for this? Is it a pipeline, or am I not supposed to do these things?
Yeah, I'd hold off for the moment. So we've just started building it into our framework, and it's something that we've started using. As we're making changes to the physical schema, we have the ability to run scripts now, but we haven't productized that into the ALM flow though, but it is a scenario that we know we need to support. So we know that as well as going along with schema changes and app changes, we will need the ability for data upgrades to be run, but at the moment, no. But it will be part of the broader ALM story. Can we just pull up the related session slide? Yeah. And we have open time now for questions on any topic that we've covered off today. That's kind of what we've been doing. But we have a couple of minutes left. To let you know just about related sessions, so we have a Q&A on integration on Wednesday morning, as well as selling and shipping in a united Dynamics 365. That's the prospect to cache integration scenario. They're going to go into a lot more detail in that. It's going to be an interesting session. It hasn't been scheduled yet or published to the calendars, but we will have a repeat of the overview of CDS session that happened at 11 o'clock today, tomorrow afternoon, I think at 1:15 in this room, but it'll get updated hopefully on the calendars this afternoon. You'll see it if you missed that one. Okay, sorry, any other questions? We got that out of the way. The question is, can you write SQL queries against the common data store? No. But what we're doing with the expression language that we're adding and with the SDK is that hopefully you can get parity in the language that we're providing. The reason we're doing that, and I'll explain, is that right now it is backed by a SQL database, but that's not going to be the case in the future. Not just a SQL database. We're looking at graph technologies, DocumentDB, we have blob storage, we're looking at stream video services. So there will be a lot of different technology actually sitting in the background that might necessarily not always be SQL. So what we want to do is abstract that in a layer and provide you an expression language and a query language that you can use that will actually work across all of those technologies within the service and not just one of them. So that's our reason for not doing direct SQL. No. And just to be clear, the question was, is it available through the Graph API? The Graph I was referring to was the Graph database technology, not the Microsoft Graph or the Office Graph. But there is work happening in the next 2 quarters to present CDS data within the Microsoft Graph. Oh, does it? So we import and export contact data. We do some really, really basic graph integration, but that's us leveraging graph data within CDS. What we're looking at in the future quarters is CDS data will be available through the Microsoft Graph APIs. So the other direction. Hi. So the question is there, what about performance of the CDS and if there's any potential integration bottlenecks? I'll answer the generic performance question first, and then Lance and Mudit can add as they like. So at the moment, we scale and manage the performance of the environments in the background, so it's not user exposed. We do know we have a requirement, and we are planning at more robust premium environments that will support, larger data sets. At the moment, those options aren't available, so it's something we monitor the environments in the background and we auto scale and make sure they're performant. Specifically around integration, I don't know if there's anything additional that might be added.
Well, I would say that we're still early days, so performance is something that you get to after you've been using it for a while, right? So that whole scale-up story is something that we're working through, so it's not perfect yet. With respect to data integration, did you have a question about data integration performance? Was that a specific question? No? Oh, great.
So how does security work with CDS and the different products and connections? Like if you connect Instagram to CDS?
Yeah, so the connections are all user account based. So I'd have to put in your credentials, username, password to go out to those connections. So if I had Twitter, I have to put in my Twitter account.
Sorry, does that answer your question?
Yeah, so when you have a connection out to a source, if I'm going to pull data in, that is not using a user role, right? The user roles manage the data that resides in the CDS database.
So I think there's two scenarios there. The D365 operations and sales scenarios that we're talking about, we've got an integration that is moving data into the CDS database that Power Apps then has one connection to through their connector. Power Apps, though, also has a whole bunch of different connectors that you can connect to Twitter and Facebook and Salesforce. Power Apps does that connection directly based on the how you authenticate when you actually establish the connection. So that's not CDS controlling that security model. We're basically controlling the security for the data brought into or integrated through CDS only. Power Apps still has its own connectors outside of the CDS world. We're one of the data sources for Power Apps. Okay?
So your question is the integration work that we're doing based on logic apps? Is that your question? No, it is not. It's based on the DIXF framework, and then we have the extensions of the M language. I think I mentioned that you could use Flow, for instance, to do data integration, but it's a different technology. I would think of Flow as I need to go build something for my environment that doesn't exist yet. This that is maybe needs orchestration of some kind and need to wait for this or that, because that's all built into that language. Yes, it's true you can move data back and forth, but if you're just moving data from point A to point B, you don't need Flow per se to do that, right? And so this technology is just, it's oriented around bulk movement of data, right? And synchronizing and dealing with deltas. It's really just about getting that flow moving back and forth between operations and sales. And other Microsoft first-party apps, and then in time there'll be some others. But it's a point A to point B kind of thing. It's not a point A, wait for a response, go do this, then transfer this data. It's not orchestration. How could you customize it to meet your requirements? So, you remember I showed in the deck here, we can actually go back to a small picture of it. Okay, so that's the easily administered. This picture here, customizable project templates. So this is about saying, I have a source system, say sales. I maybe need to do some transforms. and then they'll show up. It's washed out again, isn't it? On the left, so on the left will be that set of columns that you've done transforms to get it into that shape. Then you can map it to the source, the target system. And so, you know, if you have custom attributes, if you have whatever you've done, new tables or entities that we don't even know about, you could use this to do that if it's in AX and it surfaces as an entity, right? So that's all. So you can create as many of those project templates or projects as you want for your specific environment. Yes?
Is this another way of also restricting columns that you don't want to go from a source to a destination? If you just don't map it, it just doesn't come, right?
Yes. So the question was, if you didn't want certain sets of columns or certain kinds of columns to move between the two systems, is this a way to do that? Absolutely. You only map the fields that you want to move across. And there'll be a set of fields in sales that are unique to sales. There'll be a set of fields that are unique to operations. You don't need to map all of them. And in fact, you actually, in the short run, we might allow you to map some on one side, and some, as long as they're not disjoint. But keep in mind first, we're just going to get one direction working first. Yes?
Does common data mode have the ability to put some business logic in events like insert updates, validate, etc.?
Not yet, but that's coming. So the question was, do we have the ability to add business logic on insert, updates, deletes, and things like that? No, but that's absolutely a priority for our current planning. So that's what we're working on at the moment. We're starting to introduce some basic validation and defaulting and things like that, but the idea there is that we want, yes, on-event business logic sitting within the CDM.
Is it possible to take that from the like destination source, like from the operation or from stable systems, like rewriting the logics?
So the question was, do we have the ability to take it from the source system? We actually got that question this morning. That's the second time today. Not yet. At the moment, you would have to write something within the SDK to explicitly call back to the source system. It's not a pre-built function, but like I said, it's the second time we've heard it today, so it's something we'll discuss with our PMs. Okay. Thank you very much. If anyone else has any questions, you can come up and see us, but thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.